Perfect. And I will share my screen. Great. So welcome everybody. Thanks again to come to our lunch and learn about the 1P2000 land use bylaw housekeeping amendments. Hopefully you can see my screen, everybody. It's just the title. But before we get started, I wanted to start with the land acknowledgements. There you go. So in the spirit and respect of reciprocity and truth, we honor acknowledge the Mohkinstsis and the traditional Treaty 7 territories and the oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy of the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Stoney Nakoda nations, such as the Chiniki, Bears Paw, Goodstoney, and the Tsuut'ina nations. We also acknowledge that this traditional territory is home to the Otepixwe Métis government of Métis nations within Alberta District 5 and 6. Finally, we also acknowledge all nations, Indigenous and non, who live, work, and play on this land and who honor and celebrate this territory. So thanks everybody for joining us. So to begin, for terms of engagement, we want people to be curious, have a mind like an explorer, ask questions, and have fun. So joining us today is Kate from the city of Calgary. She is a part of the land use bylaw sustainment team. So she will bring us along to some of the amendments that are going to be held at public hearing on May 6th. So thank you very much, Kate.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mia. I'll just share my screen here to get started. And while I'm doing that, thank you everyone for your interest in joining us today. Let's just make sure that I've got that there. All right. That's showing. Oh, in there. Okay, sorry, on my end, it is showing it. It's in presentation mode, but not for you guys. Let's see. If I do that again, does it do it? Oh. Sorry, everybody. I did not use Zoom very often, so this is, okay, let's try one more time. I will make sure that this works. Get this here. Let's see if I can get this to go a little bit. And if it won't go nice and let's see if we can get that to go one more time. There we go. Okay. Well, no, okay. It's not showing it in presentation mode. Sorry, everybody, but maybe I go like this. We'll just have to do it in an imperfect way. No, that's not going to work. Mia, can you give me a tip? How can I get it so that it goes in presentation mode from Zoom from my PowerPoint?
Yeah. Hey, would it be possible for you to show it in your PDF slide instead of the PowerPoint?
Oh, yeah, we could do that. Let's try that, although I don't have that down. Okay, everyone, give me one moment. This was planned, right? Just so everyone can feel human, that it's not just them that that have always a little bit of a trouble showing a little bit of, what can we call this, technical difficulties. One moment. Okay, let's try it this way. We'll go full screen, and we will go full screen here. And okay, 1 second. Here we go, everybody. Sorry, this is not the quickest way to get started, is it? Okay, take 2. There we go. We got it. Thanks, everyone. I'm just gonna get myself here. Where we got. Okay. Well, thanks again for coming. As Mia mentioned, I'm here to provide an overview of some housekeeping amendments to our current land use bylaw for all of you that will be going to to council on May 6th. And we were at IPC on April 2nd/3rd. So this project is part of our regular bylaw sustainment work. And the intent was to find some minor amendments to the land use bylaw to increase efficiency and consistency. And from time to time, our team, the land use bylaw team, brings things forward. When we hear feedback from our colleagues that work with applications and have heard comments from you, comments from applicants, and in general, just to make sure that we are sort of like spring cleaning to the land use bylaw to make sure that it's working as intended, that things are as clear as they can be. And we refer to these as housekeeping amendments. And by what falls into that housekeeping bucket are things that are typically minor in scope, that don't require extensive public engagement. And for this go round of this work, if there was something that was shared as an idea, but it's something that really is being addressed by the new zoning bylaw, it was considered out of scope. As I mentioned before, if it was something that would require really deemed and would need us to connect with the public on it to get their input, then it was also considered out of scope. And if it was, we're hearing suggestions for a new rule, for example, when there's already discretion written into the land use bylaw, then it didn't make the cut. And while these changes, some of them can seem quite small, some of them perhaps a little bit bigger, they do still have immediate impacts, and those impacts fall into these categories, that they're providing consistency or clarity of language, so it's easier for all the different people that use the land use bylaw, whether it's folks like yourself that volunteer with community associations and are reviewing applications, my colleagues that work in community planning and are reviewing applications, or homeowners, residents, or builders and developers that are bringing forward an application. Some of these amendments are reducing barriers. So if there was a rule, for example, that was requiring lots of relaxations, or someone was doing a small change and needed a new development permit, that's what we mean when we're saying barriers. So some of the proposed changes remove some of those pieces. In general, all these changes trying to provide more efficiency, so there's less back and forth, whether it's members of the community asking questions because something just wasn't quite clear, or if to meet a rule, someone need to make multiple changes to their application or submit a new one. And some of the changes also help with the overall corporate effort at the City of Calgary to make it easier to build housing. So the amendments, there's 12 of them. We've grouped them into 4 sections where they're kind of related. And the intent here, and in talking with Mia and Afra, is to go through each section one at a time, where I'll give just a brief overview of the change, and then we'll have also up on the screen for you a red line edit of what's changing, so you've got that to reference. But at the end of each section, we'll pause and give some space for questions, and Mia and Afra are going to keep track of time for us. So this proposed amendment is not really focused, but only impacts our RG district. So the residential district that is out in our new greenfield communities and our developing areas. And the issue that it's addressing is because of the setback rule, the rear setback rule, when a homeowner or a resident was proposing a secondary suite, sometimes there could be a required relaxation for the rear setback because of the language that you can see in there that speaks about the secondary suite parking needing to be required in a private garage. So this amendment removes that unnecessary language in the rear setback rule, and better describes the location of where the parking stall should be. And a big thing for all of you to make sure that you know is that we're still requiring this parking for the suite, but it can now be on a garage or a driveway, subject, of course, to other relevant rules. So just trying to make it a little bit easier for folks to add a secondary suite to their property in the RG district. The second proposed amendment within this grouping of amendments is aligning the landscaping rules between the housing grant-oriented district and the residential contextual at-grade district. And as it is right now, if you're in an existing single detached or semi semi-detached dwelling and your parcel has been designated HGO, if you were to say, for example, do some big landscaping changes, or you're providing an addition that results in some site changes, you are required to provide a landscaping plan, etc. And so rules that were really intended for row houses, townhouses, or those row house courtyard developments. And so what this amendment does is, if you are 2 units or less and you're then you just need to meet the landscaping requirements. That's the same for all low density residential, or for all low density development. So with what's directed in our general regulations. Oh, wait, I saw the slide, but used different words. Sorry, that's not all what this one is about. This is about parcel coverage in HGO and RCG. Sorry, I can't believe I had that up. It was just I skipped ahead there to another with the next amendment, but this one in particular, my apologies, is about parcel coverage for HGO and RCG, where if you're acquiring one or more motor vehicle stalls on your site, not in a garage, you get a reduction in the amount of parcel coverage rules, and it was different in HGO than it was in RCG. So this is a small change to have it be the same between the HGO and the RCG districts. So instead of it being 21 square meters, that it's 19. My apologies. And people for this amendment, people are kind of like, what the heck are you talking about? But this is what it's getting to, is that that your parking stalls can take up a little bit more space than what's allowed at the moment, or take up less space. Sorry, so you get more parcel coverage. This amendment is proposing to remove the requirement for a mobility storage locker within the RCG and the HGO district, because there's been some implementation challenges that weren't anticipated when this was first introduced in 2022. And sometimes folks are like, what the heck are you talking about? Because there's not too many of these have been built yet. But if you see the small building, I guess that's the wrong screen. This small building here is a mobility storage locker. This amendment is clarifying that if you are an existing single detached or semi-detached building and your parcel is designated one of the multi-residential districts, that if you were to add a secondary suite, that the rules that govern that secondary suite are those that govern the low density residential districts. And this is the one, my apologies again, that is talking about the landscaping requirements in the HGO district. So once again, if you're 2 units or less, you just have to follow the standard landscaping requirements in the low density residential districts, rather than needing to provide the higher requirements that are intended for more intense development. And then the last amendment in this group of changes is the fencing rules. So this is adding some, this amendment is clarifying that these requirements within the district for fences apply only to row houses, and that for all other forms of housing within this district that you're following the existing regulations around housing. And there's really only a slight difference in the row housing fencing than for everything else, and that's talking about where the lower height for your front fence measures from. So in the RCG district, your lower height lines up with the front of the adjacent building, whereas in the low density residential fencing rules, the lower height starts at the front of the building on the parcel. Okay, I'll pause there and see if there's any questions about that grouping of amendments.
Thanks, Kate. So we have a couple of questions in the chat. So I will go from the first one from Melanie Swales from Brentwood. She wants to talk a little bit more about the bike mobility storage lockers, if you can flip back to that slide.
Yeah.
She wants to ask why take this away. Residents will not have bike parking or bike spaces, gardening tools, etc.
Yeah, Melanie, thank you for the question. This one is a hard one. So there still are class one bike stall requirements in RCG, and those are what have been there for a long time. But the added requirement for mobility storage locker was introduced when we created the housing grant oriented district in 2022. And the intent there was to provide just what you're talking about. Because there's reduced parking requirements, so how do we balance that out with enhanced requirements for bike storage or whatever, scooters, et cetera, et cetera. But what's happened in practice is that there's very high cost because of unanticipated building code requirements, and also with all of the demands for different things on a parcel, from landscaping and amenity space, etc., that in some cases we're ending up with sites that are quite cluttered, that sort of have the storage lockers all over the place and not in the best locations. And so because the requirement for class one stalls is already there, in the immediate term, the proposal is to remove that requirement. And then as part of work that's already underway with the new zoning bylaws to more comprehensively review all bike parking for all types of development across the city. So it is trying to be responsive, and it's learning from something that we tried and responding to when it doesn't work out quite as needed. And so and the result of that is
Can I ask a question to try and understand that properly? So, okay, so there's one bike stall required where they don't have a garage. Is that correct? Like, say you've got a 4-unit RCG with 4 suites. There's a total of 8 units. So there would need to be bike parking for 4. Is that correct?
Is the sum of all units where a unit or suite is not provided a motor vehicle parking stall in the garage. That's right. Yep.
Right. So if there's 8 units and there's 4-car garage, then the parking for the bikes needs to be for 4 units. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so right now those have to be in a mobility storage locker, or?
It's an additional piece. And so it was sort of an enhanced requirement.
Okay, but if you take that out, my concern is, where are those 4 bikes supposed to go then? You're still asking, where are people going to keep their stuff?
Yeah, so the class 1 stalls can be provided, and that requirement for class 1 stalls existed for a long time, and it can be provided within the suite or outside. It just has to be secured in some way.
Okay, so I'm just making the comment that I really disagree with that one. We've got one application right now where bikes have been the big stumbling block in a large way, because they're putting too much on the property essentially, and there is no room for bikes. And so at least if there's a storage locker for those bikes, then people have a place to put them. Otherwise, where do the bikes go? They just dump onto the lawn and behind the property, or where do they go? And it's not just bikes, the storage lockers could be used for other things. For example, garden tools. Like, we have an application where there is no place to put a shovel or a lawnmower or anything like that. So I'm just making the comment, I won't dwell on it, but I really think removing the storage lockers maybe means that you're overusing the property as it is. If there was room maybe you should be building 3+3 units instead of 4+4 or something. But when your property is right down to every inch or every centimeter is being used, I disagree with taking away the bikes. The city prioritizes, let's get bike lanes in, let's use bikes, let's make mobility, all that. And then we're not providing a place for people to put them. Well, that's just my comment on it.
Yeah, thanks for the comment, Melanie. You've definitely highlighted the tension that's within that. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you sharing it.
Great, thanks, Kate. So moving on down from the chat, We have Pat Gillamon's question. Why decrease the space for parking garages?
Is this, my suspicion is that we are getting to, is it this one here for the parcel coverage? Pat, is that the one that you're asking about, or is it about the rear setback rule in RG?
My concern is limited parking space. We have a 24-unit development proposed with only parking for 12, and we're told the parking stalls are too small. People drive trucks. They don't fit in these parking stalls. We've got a big concern.
And so you're asking for if the parking stall sizes can be larger?
Yeah. Like when it's 21 meters, then you cut it down to 19. I realize it's only 2, but if it's a truck or something else like that, it's not going to fit.
This is talking about the full parcel coverage, right? So there is, if you're requiring, if you're reducing the amount of parcel coverage when you're providing those stalls not in a garage, reducing that amount, you're reducing the amount of total parcel coverage that's allowed. And so there's no change to the permitted size for the parking stall, but what I'm hearing, Pat, is you'd like us to look at the dimensions for the parking stalls.
Yeah, and see, it cuts it down, and when you've got a 24 unit, we go into 48 bedrooms. Not everyone is going to be walking or riding a bike. There's going to be at least 2 vehicles every unit. Where do they park? Like, it's bizarre.
Right. So this amendment isn't talking about the parking rates, but what I'm hearing is that you'd like there to be more parking.
Yeah. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're cutting down the parking area from 21 to 19, and I realize it's only 2 square meters. Is that what I'm understanding?
No, it's about the allowable parcel coverage. And so it's in order to accommodate the parking stalls, the total parcel coverage is reduced so that you have more space for those parking stalls.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Great. And then this goes back to Melanie as well. Can you also address the 0 lot line for the garages, which seems to be increasingly common?
So Melanie, we're not proposing any changes to that with these housekeeping amendments, but is it that you just would like to share the comment that that there's some concerns with the 0 lot lines?
Kate, thank you. I think if you could go back to that drawing that Pat was just referring to that showed the 21 and the 19. Okay, that. And so what strikes me, I think what Pat was after too, is if you, like the drawing on the left has narrower parking spaces width side to side than the one on the right. And the problem that we're finding too is that these garages are being built with a bare minimum of parking width. So maybe 2.5 meters or whatever the bare minimum is. And it's not fitting the people's vehicles. Like if you look at how many people drive an SUV or a truck or a larger vehicle, their vehicles don't fit inside the garages. And so therefore they have to park on the street. You've got, more of a shortfall. But both of your drawings here, what struck me is that the drawings show the parking, either the pad or the garages, whichever it is, the gray area with side setbacks on both sides. And increasingly what I'm seeing on some of the applications is that they're using a 0 lot line. And I don't think most residents are even aware that a 0 lot line is an option. What occurred to me is if you have the setback, the neighbor's fence or your fence that runs between properties can be a maximum of 2 meters high. But a garage all of a sudden can be much higher and right closer to the wall. So essentially you've got a wall down one side of your property now that is your property line. Like so it just made me think when you looked at when that drawing is there, I want there to be a setback on all sides because neighbors do not want a 0 lot line when it wasn't planned that way. There's communities where 0 lot line is implemented from the start, but 0 lot line doesn't work very well where a neighbor doesn't want to give anybody access onto that property. So just your drawing there is one thing, and I realize maybe not part of this amendment, but I think we have to address the zero lot line because people are being really shocked when they see one come up. They don't know that that's an option.
Okay, thanks, Melanie.
Perfect. And then moving on to Lisa Poole. I know Lisa Poole, you also had a little bit more about the parking as well. So please discuss placements of garbage bins when the garbage unit takes up all space on the rear of the property, thinking about an application with 7 garages which span the lot. The current garbage bin placement proposed for 14 units is along the side fence right next to the neighbor's home. And regarding the decrease of the garage size, we are hearing that many vehicles do not fit, forcing people to park onto the street.
So Kate, I'll just jump in here because I guess I'm echoing what Pat and Melanie have also raised. And it just feels like sometimes too many units are being forced onto a lot that actually can't accommodate it. So if the garages are so small, people can't fit their cars in, it's causing other problems. And the garage, and the garbage bins, like the lack of space for a garbage bin in the back alley is a massive, public health concern, not to mention, stinky. So like right by someone's backyard, it just seems unconscionable that that would be permitted and considered appropriate. And also the problem is you can't wheel the garbage bins out through the back alley. You have to go through this weird convoluted pathway almost through the whole property, and think of how noisy those bins are when people roll them, and think of when you have 14 units, how many bins are required. It's like there's, in this one development I'm thinking of, there's very little yard space and most of it will be occupied with the garbage bins.
Thanks, Lisa. As I'm sure you can probably guess that this set of amendments isn't getting to waste and recycling space or density or the things that you're talking about there, but I am going to put a plug into the Phase 5 engagement for the zoning bylaw, which is starting May 5th, because some of what will be talked about there is all the trade-offs between the development standards. So what you're getting to, how do we, what are all the different things that it's required to be provided on a site? How are they working together, and how can we use the space of the parcel more efficiently, and address some of the concerns that we've heard? Because as you know, for row house development, townhouse development, managing and thinking through how do we provide adequate space for all those waste and recycling bins is something that that we've been hearing from community for a while.
And so I'll just jump in here and say, I get that it's not exactly what the amendment deals with, but there's a domino effect. And so what the amendments are proposing will have an impact on those other things. And so I don't think they can be disentangled from one another, that they should be all considered as a big package.
Right. And so your concern is that by allowing for a little bit less parcel coverage for those parking stalls, that will impact the space for the waste and recycling bins?
Well, I was thinking more that it sort of gets back to what Melanie and Pat were saying, that it almost renders the parking stalls useless. If people can't fit their cars in them, then it's defeating the purpose, and it's creating it's not solving problems, it's creating other problems. And so the point is that I think, as has already been said, instead of allowing more stalls, there should be stalls that are actually functional.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I think those are all the questions in the chat. I don't see anyone.
I just wanted, sorry, Mia, I just thought this amendment is speaking about the rules specifically that are for parking stalls that are not in a garage as well, right? So that doesn't mute what, or that doesn't take away from Melanie or Lisa what you were sharing, but just to clarify that this regulation, the specific regulation, deals specifically with, how many times can I say specific? This regulation is about those stalls that are not within a garage. So it doesn't mean that what you're saying is not important, but I just wanted to clarify that piece, that it's not talking about the width or the functionality of the spaces within a garage.
Kate, if I can make a comment just again on the width of the cars, even if they're parked outside, I mean, people's vehicles are big. I went to Walmart one day and measured the width of parking stalls, and they were wider than the 2.5. And we all know when you pull into Walmart, you have to really be careful that the neighbor doesn't ding your door or that you don't ding the other door. So I just think we have to be really careful if we're narrowing down the width of the cars because we're not accommodating the types of vehicles that people actually have. And we're just increasing conflict. If you have to pull into a very narrow space and you're both of your neighbors are driving, big doored cars, you are probably going to get dinged.
Okay.
Or if you have a baby seat to get out of the side of the car, something that, it just is less than ideal.
All right. I think,
Perfect.
Mia, what you were getting to is to keep going into the next section of amendments.
Yes,
Is that
just to make sure
okay?
we're covering everything on the time.
And to be fair, Lisa Belli, those are great questions, and those are the most amendments are in that section. So this next set of amendments, the intent with them is really trying to provide clearer language and clarifying where there may be some confusion in the rules as they are right now. So one of them is this first one is talking around some of the language that's included in the land use bylaw around appeals. And so as you can see here at the moment, there's two things that are being changed. So at the moment, the land use bylaw references the Alberta Court of Appeal and then also mentions the appeal body. And as many of you probably know, everything around appeals is governed through the Municipal Government Act and is something that guides all municipalities in Alberta. So instead of including some specific wording around the different appeal bodies, it's just using the wording of appeal body. So if there's ever any changes to the MGA that we're not needing to, and they change the name of the Court of Appeal or something like that, then instead we're just, what's included in our regulation just says appeal body. And then the other change is where at the moment there's reference to the number of days in the appeal period, and that also is governed in the Municipal Government Act. And so instead of including the number of days, we're just referencing the appeal period, and the guidance for that then comes from the Municipal Government Act. So just a little bit small wording changes to provide a little bit more clarity. And then also including this reference.
Sorry to interrupt, Kate. Just to clarify, the 21 days, we're not changing the 21-day period, right?
That's right, because that's all under the purview of the Municipal Government Act. And then also just including this language around when an appeal is filed within the appeal period. And what that appeal period is, et cetera, is also governed through the Municipal Government Act. And then this one is a minor one where when it was introduced, we included the word gross unnecessarily. So just removing the textual error to remove the word gross. And then this last one is removing some expired text. Any questions about those three?
So one specific question from Jennifer Baldwin refers back to the 21 days period. And she is asking, why remove the language of the specific 21 days?
So the reason we're removing the language is because from time to time, the provincial government does change it. So a couple of years ago, they changed it from 14 days to 21 days. And it's being clear around where does that responsibility and direction live? And it lives in the provincial legislation, and we enact it and need to follow it. And so it's just making sure that we're not in a case that there's ever any discrepancy between the two pieces of legislation.
Sorry, could I expand onto that? Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, my fear about removing the 21 days, that specificity in that bylaw there, I understand fully what you're saying, that it could fluctuate over the years. It's just, when people are trying to kind of wrap their heads around, okay, so, especially when you're going to the SDAB, it's a very technical process. It's very complicated. A lot of people, a lot of neighbors don't have that know-how of how the process is supposed to be. So I think including it, even though, yes, it could change in a few years, I just think that leads for more transparency with residents. Because if we start kind of hiding what that 21 days is, they might miss that they only have 21 days, right? Because if you go past 21 days, then you need to look at getting potentially legal counsel to then even reason to the SDAB why you're past the 21 days. So I just think for transparency, it'd be better to include the language and then update the bylaw as the law changes provincially.
That's totally one of the options. There's also, I think, Jennifer, some of what you're speaking to there is things like for on the development map, when people are notified about an application, and all of the resources available on the Subdivision Development Appeal Board's website is just making sure that there is information. For me, there's always that balance between where should the information live? Should it be within the regulations themselves or all of the support documents around it? That's a fair point and one perspective on the change.
Well, and just to add to that, so with the DMAP, I mean, unfortunately on the DMAP, there's a lot of inconsistent information. And so like for HGO parcels per se, on the DMAP, it'll say your 21-day period begins after public notices. But public notices isn't, something that HGOs have to go through in that process because they're permitted use in those HGO parcel districts. So people will be waiting on the notices board and then waiting for that to pop up and then think their 21 days starts. So there's that lack of clear communication from the city of kind of what that boundary is for them.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's totally fair.
Great. Did that also answer your question as well, Pat? Your question was, my concern is many wishing to appeal may not know the time period.
Well, my big concern is, let's face it, right here, most of us, we sort of know a bit more about it than the average resident does. But when they see their sign on the front lawn near them, they go berserk. And then it's only there for 5 or 7 days. They're worried. They don't know what else to do. And then if the 21-day isn't shown somewhere that they can get it, and a lot of them don't even know what the DMAP is. You have to explain it to them. So I think the more transparent that the city can be to show people what they can actually do or don't want to do. Not everyone wants to appeal, but at least they know it's there. And I just think they need to know, because not everyone is educated, and having just gone through an appeal and dealing with the residents impacted, it was quite an education for them.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's a fair point, Pat. And for many people, they don't really ever think about any planning legislation, be it municipal or provincial, until they're part of an appeal. And I think it's all good points. The question in my head is always where it's not at all that we don't need to provide the information. It's just thinking about where do people go, right? Are people going to section 39.1 of the land use bylaw, or where are they looking to get it? And so, yep, those are all fair points, and I can pass along the feedback to my colleagues that work on DMAP and are in charge of getting all that material out.
All right, and then finally, Lisa Bull, there's more clarity when 21-day period is specified.
Kate, you sort of already addressed that. And once again, I understand your logic behind it, but kind of echoing Pat, maybe if you decide it shouldn't be provided here for the reasons that you've stated, maybe what we need is to have some sort of a booklet for residents, because I think the issue is that a lot of the information is provided from the perspective of what's useful for the city, but people trying to navigate the city websites, the information is in multiple places. It's hard to find any one spot where you can find the information you need. It is not friendly. A DMAP, as someone else has said, is often not updated. It's inconsistent. And so it is like a big rabbit's warren or wild goose chase trying to find the information that you need. And so if you don't want it here, I think it needs to be clearly indicated somewhere else where we can all rely upon the information being updated and available, so people understand what their options are.
Totally.
Kate, if I can add to that, and Lisa's bang on that, but part of the problem is the file managers, they are busy, but we don't get notified when a DP is approved. So we have no way of knowing. It goes into this vast chamber, we submit our comments, and then we don't know if a DP is approved. So the only way we can check is if we keep referring to the DMAP daily and seeing, but if we don't look at the DMAP for a week, then we might be down to only 2 weeks to file an appeal. And that means contacting the residents, seeing who wants to appeal it, if they want to appeal it. The time frame is just really short. So I think it goes back to if communities are putting feedback in on a proposal, they should be notified saying it was approved today so that we have dates to go by, because right now we don't.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody, for your questions. So we'll move on to the business flexibility. Is that all right, Kate?
Thank you. So there's two proposed amendments here. This first one is around the healthcare service use, which is a different use than hospitals, etc. And it is what is being proposed here is to allow for an overnight stay, which is something that's not possible today. And for businesses and proposals that would like to allow for, like to be able to offer overnight stays for medical treatment, for things like a birthing center or a sleep study or something like that, they're going forward with a direct control district. And so this amendment is, instead of forcing people into direct control district, allowing those overnight stays to be possible when it meets these rules. So when it's not something like an emergency, intensive, or long-term care, and when it's not located within the AVPA area. And then the second amendment within this group is including the language of neighborhood activation within the special function class 1 use to give a little bit more flexibility for more tactical urbanism projects, etc., being hosted by community associations or community groups around the city, or folks like my colleagues working on the downtown team. Any questions about those two?
Great. So from there are some questions about the overnight stay. Lisa Poole asks if they are in residential or in commercial areas.
This is not a use in residential districts. No, it's just in commercial, mixed use commercial, or in some industrial districts.
Thank you.
And then from Pat, would this be a respite home, short-term stay more than overnight?
I guess she's answered it if it's not going to be in residential areas. I was thinking of the respite homes that they have in Australia. If you've had surgery, maybe 2 or 3 people can stay there and have some, what do you call it, therapy or that, and then go home after 2 or 3 days. But I guess that's not what you're referring to.
No, because it's not a use in the residential districts. But I'd say the intent is to make it easier, more flexibility for that type of service, but not within a residential area.
And then Lisa Poole asked, could you go again on the special function class use 1?
Sorry, there was a lot of language in there that I haven't heard before. Special function class 1 use, I'm not sure where it applies or what exactly we're talking about here.
Yep, that's okay. That's a good question, Lisa. So this use is something that our friends at the Federation of Calgary Communities are familiar with, because this is, if you think of when a community event is being held, or a stampede breakfast or something like that, many of those fall within the special function class 1 use. But some of the projects that are happening that aren't necessarily an event, so maybe it's like a I was referring to the tactical urbanism. If you think of some of the Activate YYC projects that have been community associations have been doing, where they're maybe including some art or some treatment of a plaza or that extends to the street or something like that. Those were being approved as special function class 1, but not really clearly identified as falling within this group of group of activities. But it is temporary events is a short way to say it. And this is just giving a little bit more flexibility so that the temporary events don't always need to have people with it, but it can be more of temporary interactive public art installation or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
To be honest, I'd say that some of you on the call, or Mia, or even Adam, who works at the Federation of Calgary Communities, are more intimately connected with this use than I am.
And sorry, there is another question. I don't see it. Oh, sorry, Melanie, did you have another question?
Sorry, I just typed in the cat. What is the definition of temporary? Like, is temporary a day, a week, a month, the entire summer? Like, what does temporary mean?
I should know this off the top of my head, but I do not, Melanie, but it is defined. And it is, I can't remember what. Yeah, I will follow. Can I commit to following up with Mia with the duration for you? Because I don't want to say something wrong or mess this up by trying to look it up.
Yeah, that's fine, Kate. Thank you. Okay.
I'll follow up with Mia. But yes, when it's approved for a specific period of time.
Great, I see no more questions. So, Kate, you can move on to the childcare service.
Okay. So our very last amendment is proposing. So at the moment, if someone is looking to provide childcare service in an existing building within a residential area, they're required to bring forward a direct control district. And so what this amendment is proposing is adding childcare service as a discretionary use within the residential districts, but only when it's approved within an existing approved building. And so I should say that this feels like a big change, but the building code and provincial requirements for providing a childcare service are quite substantial. And so there's quite a bit of cost tied with upgrading an existing residential building so that it could provide childcare service. And so it's not as though this is removing that many barriers, but it is removing that one piece, that it is moving it into the discretionary DP process rather than requiring a land use amendment for a direct control district. And the childcare guidelines will are still in place, and they will help guide that discretionary review. Any questions about that one? And that is our last amendment.
Oh, sorry, I have a question just so I can understand that one a little better. Were you saying so for the childcare service, they can go for DC without having to go land use through this? Or how does when you say existing approved, they already have the DC from land use prior?
No, sorry, Jennifer. That's a good question. So at the moment, if someone would like to provide a childcare service within a residential area, they must apply for a land use amendment for a direct control district. And what this amendment is bringing forward is it's adding to the list of uses within the low density residential districts. It is adding childcare service as a discretionary use, but only when it's proposed within an existing approved building. Does that I kind of just said the same thing.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my head around that. I don't know why I can't ingest
Yeah,
that. I'm really
that's
sorry.
okay. So
I think
that's all right, Jennifer. It's all good, and it's good. It's always important for someone like me to practice saying things in a clearer way. And so today, if you wanted to provide childcare service in a residential area, you need to submit a land use amendment
right.
and then go through the DP process.
Yeah.
And what this is proposing is to say that if you wanted to provide childcare service in a residential area and you are going to locate within an existing building, then it is you just go to a discretionary development permit and no land use amendment.
So just so then for an example, like if I was to say, look at a bungalow in a community,
Yeah.
and so maybe I need to renovate it, etc., to make it a little larger to fit, said child amount needed. And say I did the renos to my house where it fits in the RCG, and now I want to apply to do childcare services. So then I could go for DC essentially with no land use. Even though you do have, obviously, I know your requirements for childcare services that would have to be met, but then you just wouldn't have land use. You would go straight to DP with looking for a DC.
You would just go to a development permit.
I see. So the only question then I guess I have around that, what makes me nervous, and like DCs are a little tricky too, because I wonder, so if they get a DC, say they change their mind later, and say they operate like a childcare service for say a year, and then they decide, okay, I actually want to close down this business, and they're no longer running a DC, but they now have just a primary residence again. Do they get to keep the DC land zoning then?
So anytime someone applies for a land use amendment,
It stays with it, doesn't it?
It stays with it unless they go. It depends on what the application is, right? So in some cases today, what usually is happening is folks will propose a land use amendment with a direct control district that's based on the RCG district, and then they add childcare as either a permitted or a discretionary use. But then the other uses and regulations are what's provided, what exists in the RCG district. So once you have the land use amendment in place and it's approved by council, it's what's on the parcel until you apply for a new one. And as long as any new development would just need to meet the rules of that district.
But this would remove that going to council essentially.
What it is instead of, yes, so this amendment would mean that if someone meets the rules and they have an existing building, that they would just apply for a development permit. I
think this one makes me a little uncomfortable because I like the idea of still having that land use phase, because I think that's when public input really still matters. Like I hate eliminating the public's voice, and I feel that that's kind of the direction we're moving more and more in. And I understand council does pass a lot of these things regardless, but it's really tough when we keep eliminating, especially with DC. DC makes me nervous just because once you have that DC zoning, you're really open after to doing more things with your land than necessarily like anticipated, or changing things that are already on the land, like RCs, etc. So yeah, just something I would prefer if we could keep the land use phase, but that's just me.
That's fair, Jennifer. Any other questions for this amendment?
Kate, I actually have a question myself when it comes to this childcare, and it's building on Jennifer's question. So if you had an RCG and you wanted a childcare service, you're actually not applying for a DC, but you're actually staying in the RCG and just applying for a DP change?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the childcare is actually RCG, but with childcare as a use under discretionary. So it still goes through the process.
I see. So then they wouldn't be looking for DC anymore.
That's right.
Yeah. I got you. Thank you for clarifying that.
No, thanks for clarifying. I was wanting to understand as well. No, go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, I just have a comment, and I'll say for one thing, I'm sort of pleased that this is changing in a way. The reason is we have been working with a applicant for over 2 years to change a home in our community to a daycare, which is drastically needed. And if the process can be, made simpler or tightened up. I don't know what the actual word is I should be asking for. I think it would be great because I know what this lady has gone through for the last 2 years, and we still don't have the daycare open yet. It's getting there, but not there yet. And it's drastically needed in our neighborhood. So if it can be made easier for the applicant in some ways, I would like to see it because we've been very involved with her from the beginning as a community.
Right. Thanks, Pat. Yeah, that's part of the intent here. It's not, by no means is it removing all the barriers, but it's removing that one piece.
Perfect. I see no more questions, Kate.
Sorry, I just have one more quick
go
one.
ahead.
So sorry. So this would only apply to like if you were necessarily, so as we said, in RCG and you've got a structure that would be a typical residence home, right? It's not necessarily a commercial like building that we're discussing.
Yeah, so it's adding this as a use to the low density residential districts. We did pull some stats to see how many commercial buildings are on residential parcels, and there's not very many of them. There are some, but it's not very many. And so if you are one of the very few cases where you are a residential parcel and there's an existing commercial building, then adding this as a discretionary use would mean that it's possible for those buildings. But it is predominantly looking at folks doing what Pat's talking about, where they're converting an existing residential building to then accommodate childcare.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Yeah, no worries. All right. Okay. All good questions, everyone. Oh, right. Sorry, my bad. There is one other amendment that was brought forward by members of the Infrastructure and Planning Committee. So it wasn't something that administration brought forward, but what they added, and that is an amendment to reduce the bike parking requirements for multi-residential developments from 1 stall per unit down to half a stall per unit. And so that is something that, or the rate, sorry, 0.5 stalls per a unit. So it's looking at providing less bike parking in multi-residential developments.
So what's the logic behind that?
Yeah, you know what? There wasn't too much debate at committee when it was brought forward, but when it was brought forward by Councillor Meehan, some of it was so similar to the mobility storage lockers when changes were brought forward, when the HGO district was introduced, the parking requirements for multi-residential developments was lowered. And so the intent was to sort of balance out that lower parking requirement with higher bike parking requirement. But what we're seeing is that many multi-residential developments are providing full parking. And so they're providing full parking and then still providing more bike parking. And so trying to make it, like the proponents for this would say that they're trying to make it so that they can, even though it's fewer bike parking, that they can provide better, more functional bike parking. But yeah, so it's going.
What's the multi-residential? This would not be for a minimum of 20 units. Was there anything with a designation of M on it?
That's right. So this is a change in the multi-residential, the rules for the general rules for the multi-residential districts. And so, and they apply with, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand. We had a specific case, but we had an application for an RCG, which was not big enough to hold what the applicant wanted to build. So the applicant is applying for an MCG. So now we have 8 units on an MCG. We have minimal parking, and the parking's already been a problem. Now we have the bike problem. I wouldn't support a relaxation on bikes. I mean, either you give the people a parking spot or you give them a bike spot, but I don't see why we would reduce the bike spots on them. Like you're telling the residents they're not going to have a car because they can use bikes or transit, and then you're not providing parking on the bikes. Like I really feel like that one shouldn't, if the city's serious about bike lanes and wanting to get people onto bikes, then give them a place to put their bikes. And this would apply to fairly small ones. I mean, this was an MC1 with a total of 8 units. So it's not just big apartment buildings or something like that where they might have adequate parking. Either that or tie the parking tie the bikes to the parking. Like if a resident has to have either a space for a bike or a car, but giving somebody no space for a bike and no parking space doesn't seem like it aligns with the city's objectives of getting people onto bikes.
Melanie, can I say that you've provided a great segue to the next step, which is the public hearing, where if you have thoughts on any of these, on any of the specific amendments or this bike parking one that was introduced at committee, then as many of you know, you can let your councillor and members of council know. The public hearing is May 6th. And all of the ways to submit, whether written or to speak at the public hearing, you can find resources around that at calgary.ca/council. Which Melanie, I apologize if that feels like I am cutting away from your comment, but that it's totally a fair comment, and that's something that if you feel passionately about it, then it's certainly something to let your member of council know.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Kate, for coming here and speaking and answering questions from our community association members as well. I really want to thank our community association members coming out and asking these wonderful questions and having those comments as well. And I highly, from the Federation, highly recommend you talk to your counselors and register to speak at public hearing for May 6th. Because you guys had excellent comments and excellent commentary about these amendments as well. So I will be sending out the presentation from today, which will have the links for the public hearing on May 6th, as well as the information about the project. In addition to that, I will be sending out the video from this Lunch and Learn. And for Melanie, for the temporary use definition, would it be all right if I share it with everyone else who's on this call as well?
Absolutely.
Perfect. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely rest of your day and have a lovely long weekend.
Can I do one last thing, Mia? Sorry, is that I'm just going to say that this presentation pulls from two attachments that for the report that you can find at calgary.ca/land use bylaw. There's a direct link to the council report, and there is a summary of all of the amendments. And there's also a red line version of the amendments, which is what went into for creating this presentation. So if you're looking for the full bang of everything or the full set of information, check out calgary.ca/land use bylaw.
Perfect. Have a lovely day, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.